right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Glad we are all on time here, and I'll go ahead and ask Senator Baumgartner to open us up.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So in an effort to keep moving us forward, I'm going to respectfully ask for our Executive Director of the Board of Regents, Dr. Blake Flanders, to come forward. He does have some information for us on the JCERT language.
Thank you, Senator Baumgartner, members of the committee. We've taken a look at the language that you all have been debating. I know the JCERT board has had an opportunity to review and approve that language. We've talked to the individual institutions, University of Kansas, Kansas State University, and I want to especially thank Johnson County Community College for making their additions and so that it works for them as well. Really just adding some language that tightens the language a little, makes it clearer in the future. So that's where we are at this point, and we do have agreement among the institutions to move forward.
And Madam Chair, it's my understanding that has been turned into our revisor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Madam Chair, I know I have spoken back and forth on this repeatedly. It is unfortunate that it's taken this long, but I do appreciate that you got in there and that we had that oversight. I wish that this had gone to the Board of Regents initially, because that's how we avoid people being excluded. But I appreciate that we're going to be there. I know it's an issue that needs to get resolved, so I do appreciate that very much. And Nick, do you think you'll have that for us at our next meeting to be able to look at?
Yes, I do. Depending on what time the next meeting is, but I believe if it's after lunch sometime, that'll be ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, does the Senate have any other items that you wanted to propose at this time?
Madam Chair, I do know that Nick did prepare yesterday and into the evening. He did prepare documents that removed the out-of-state components with regard to the Promise Act, correct? And so we know that that work has been done.
Yes, Madam Chair, I did send you kind of what we would do in the underlying conference committee report to remove those out-of-state provisions with regard to the Promise Act, and I'd be happy to forward that on to the conference committee if they would like to see that. But all those provisions have been removed. It was a simple striking of those specific sections, including a new section for the out-of-state component, and the delayed sections, and then also making adjustments to the title and repealer to effectuate that change.
All right, so I'm going to take a moment here, or we're going to just go through the list of items that we have approved thus far, and then schedule a meeting again today, later this afternoon. So for the Promise Act within our CCR 2567, we have changed residency to in-state only. We have added additional language related to what Senator Baumgartner has provided us in terms of approval of programs. We have moved the open enrollment date back to 24/25. We have added military language to not make automatic acceptance for students that are part of a military family. They would be part of the lottery system. We are hopeful that at our next meeting, we will have JCERT language. We have added the addition of the virtual school funding of $6.4 million, which is an addition of $600 per virtual school student to $5,600. We have approved dyslexia coordinator will not be a fee for service. It will be paid out of SGF. And I believe those are the changes that we have made thus far. Any others, Senator Baumgartner?
Yes, there is another. The Senate did just pass House Bill 2466, the CCR on that. And that is for the PAC program, which is that Promoting Advancement in Computer Knowledge. It also included the new CTE pilot program that would include Washburn Technical Institution. And that we will need to have funding for that for the Career Tech pilot program. The funding is $40,000. But for the component that is specific to the computer science, I'm going to need a little help from the reviser on that. It seems to me that it was originally discussed that it would be up to $1 million, but I'll need to make sure that that is what you have. That would be from the bill that came out of the House. That would have been from the original 2466. Do you have a fiscal note on that?
So the original introduced version of 2466 for the computer science advancement grant would have appropriated $1 million to the Department of Education for the grants for high quality professional learning providers to implement teacher professional development programs. And it also would have appropriated $1 million to the State Board of Regents for pre-service teacher programs and credentialing and computer science initiatives.
Can you give us the total for 2466?
The bill currently does not specify, does not have any appropriations tied to it. It simply establishes grant programs subject to appropriations. So you, the legislature, would have authority to determine the amount that would be appropriated to those programs.
Jade? Okay. I'm looking at a draft that was provided me that I now see from Representative Hubert, and he put down $2 million. But if you could double check on that, I think that would be helpful.
In addition, we do have a few items that Representative Hoffman wants to bring relating to making sure we move the money into 2567. So Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first one would be it would be GBA number 2, item 10, which is the educational caseload adjustment. That would be, we would need to accept that GBA so we could get the caseload adjustment done. Oh, yes, that'd be great.
Mine?
The second one would be because Senate Bill or House substitute or Senate substitute for House Bill 2239 did become law. That is the one that increases the exemption for the statewide mill levy from $20,000 to $40,000 on valuations. That is we need to add $42.8 million to SGF into the state foundation aid. So that would be something that we need to do in this bill. And then the budget committee, the House Budget Committee did not accept the $30 million special education excess cost increase, which was GBA number 2, and the Senate said that this committee would review it. So at some point, we need to either just not do anything and it won't be accepted, or make a statement on that.
Okay, so for GBA number 2 and House Bill 2239, where we need to add 42.8 million to offset the property tax reductions for Kansans, we would want just approval from this committee on that. And then finally, on the special education, I think we had a discussion on that, that the computation for special education, if you look at it, we could have a further discussion. We are, with the amount of money that we are putting in for all special education, actually, if you compute it in a way where you just look at how much money we're putting in, we're at 92%. So it's just I think the excess cost is not really explicitly written in statute. And so I think there are some concerns about what that number really means. And so it is not an offer on the House side. So I will, yes, Representative Hoff.
Madam Chair, I just want to, Gabrielle, my understanding is if we don't do anything, then that GBA is just not put forward. Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how you understand it too. Okay, thank you.
I got a question for you.
We have Senator Sykes and then Representative Wynn.
Thank you. My first question, I think JG was going to answer that, and it was back to that 1 million, or was it 2 million for the CTE? Because I thought it was one for KPOR and then one. But and then I guess now with this, I think the Senate position is that we increase by that 30 million for special education, and I appreciate this with the balances on that. But as I've been doing some more research, understanding that there are payments that have to be made for SPED throughout the entire year because of services, and they do not receive those federal match dollars from June until October. So where I am looking at unencumbered cash balances, I know a lot of those are spoken for, and it's just to be able to have that cash in the bank.
Okay, well, I would just clarify that it's the position from the Senate, from Ways and Means and the appropriations was not to add the 30 million, it was to bring that discussion here. So if that's something that the Senate wants to offer, we would certainly consider it. I would also say that if you look at those cash balances, they have grown 15% in the last 5 years. So it's not just that they have $220 million available to them to use, but those balances in those funds have increased. And if you'd like to know, if anyone would like to know more about the computation of excess costs, be happy to discuss that, because it's an interesting formula that isn't really set in statute thoroughly, and has a lot of room for ambiguity. So Representative Wynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have two questions, but I'll go back to the SPED question. Help me understand how you came up with 92% when I asked revisers this morning, it was 70, 4 or 70 something.
So we have the computations that were provided by legislative research, and they're right here. And it says 73%, 71, 70, and 76%. So I understand that. But what we do is, what I did was I took how much money we're actually spending, and we are spending 500, let's say 23. 520 million, the state of Kansas is putting in. I added the base state aid plus the weightings for each of these 29,000 students. That comes up to 238 million. I added federal money, which is 132 million, and then I added Medicaid, which is 45 million. So when you add up all of those, that's $936,687,918 that Kansas spends on this 29,000 students. That's the population, that's how much we spend. If you were to just take those raw numbers, and this is not the way the Kansas Department of Education does it, it's not what they provide, the consensus revenue. So I'm not suggesting that this is not the practice, but I'm just suggesting these are what the hard raw numbers are. If you take that and you divide it by the amount of money the school districts say that they spend, which is $1 billion, that's 92%, which that is $32,299 per pupil. Now, if you just took the state aid portion, then we're talking about 18,000 per pupil. So it's not how the consensus revenue estimate does it. It's not how the KSD, but that's the raw numbers of how much we're spending. So if anybody wants to know how much we are actually putting towards 29,000 students in that population, that's the number that we're putting it.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And then the second, I think Nick was supposed to come back with an answer about the military students, or someone was supposed to come back with the answer about the military students.
I think we did resolve that, but you can go over that again if you'd like. There's two different ways that we were looking at it. And Nick, you can address that.
Thank you. Nick, you can talk.
So I don't know how that BRAC commission does their evaluations. The only thing I would note is with this open enrollment provision that's in there currently in the bill, that's not current law right now. So you'd be removing that from the open enrollment provisions that would be taking effect. So that would never become law in the state of Kansas to allow military students to attend any school district in the state, regardless of capacity limitations. But again, I don't know how the BRAC Commission does their evaluations, and I can't speak for them.
Thank you.
And just to kind of follow up on that, that school districts currently are not bound by any statute that says they have to take the military. So that we're really keeping it status quo on that issue. Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back to the SPED, I agree that these have increased, but I would also say that the caseload has increased. And I appreciate that 29,000, but that is FTEs where there's over 88,000 of IEPs. So some of those services may be, speech one time a week. So I think I would be interested to have this conversation offline, but I think there is a little bit of discrepancy there.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I may sound like a broken record, but it's easy to spend money. My question will and always will be, how is that helping our students do better, achieve better? That's what I want to know. If we give them additional money, I want to know specifically how's that going to be spent to help. And in this case, we're talking special education. But I'm going to keep pounding that question because we talk about more money. We never talk about the accountability for how those funds are used. And I want to see how they're going to be used and how that's going to impact positively our students. And I don't want us to lose sight. That should be the heart of our conversation. That should be the core, not a last minute consideration because we talk about how it impacts. Well, it's hard for school districts to implement. It's hard for this. It's hard for that. The kids should be the driving factor in how it impacts them. So before I would agree to put one more penny into anything, if I can see how that's going to help our kids, but just throwing more money at it with no accountability for outcomes and how it's going to help kids, I don't want us to lose sight of that should be the focus of our conversations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just again, to remind everyone, what is excess costs? Excess costs are not stipulated specifically in the statute. So what has been done historically is add 4% salary increases, which we found out today is not really 4% salary increases, but it's 4% of the total expenditures. So they add 4% to that calculation. And then on top of that, they estimate a number of teachers and new teachers. Now, they put in 300, and that's a historical kind of typical number, but really we know that a pair is only 0.4 of that position. And they calculate 72,000 per teacher, 300 teachers. But if you do the math and you listen to our school districts are telling us, special education teachers are telling us, we do not have a ratio of 2 to 1, but that's what we're funding. We're funding a 2 to 1 ratio. And what we are hearing is that is not a 2 to 1 teacher ratio. But that is what's in the calculation. So we would rather understand exactly where the money is going, how it's being spent, and that's going to make a huge difference for us. Senator Bunkard.
I'll just circle back to a conversation we had briefly yesterday. And again, thank you to JG for providing a quick review. But whatever we do, if we are to do something out of SGF for our special education, that now goes into what we must account for, not just next year, but every subsequent year for maintenance of effort. And so, so that would be a concern of mine. I think another issue that's of concern is, I know that we're often talking about, at least the Department of Education prepares slide presentations about vacant positions. And oftentimes, what is the largest category is going to be special education instructors. And the fact of the matter is, we have a shortage of special education instructors. And I understand school districts saying, give us more funding. That does not change what is available in the hiring pool. That is not ever addressed by the Department of Education of what could be done to improve the hiring pool. And, you know, that requires special certification. So that needs to be a discussion, I believe, an appropriate discussion between the Department of Education as well as the Board of Regents institutions. Because the Department of Education certifies those SPED teachers, but they're going to be graduating from the institutions that the Board of Regents oversees. I think we took a significant first step. This wasn't the ask of the Department of Education. This wasn't even the ask of school districts. But when we approved last year the Promise Act and put $10 million in there for scholarships, one of those umbrella categories is education, where we will fully fund a Promise eligible student for the first 2 years of their college career to go into education. So it really is, I think the onus is on higher ed institutions to what are they going to pony up for people to get the continuation of that education and that credentialing for special education. And it is the onus of the school districts to be promoting this as an available scholarship for students to go into education. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And just a couple more points on special education, because it is an important issue and one where there's a lot of misunderstanding on the issue. Right now, the school districts say they spend $1 billion. You add on to that, the base state aid. So let's just say it's $1.3 billion. If you just look at those numbers alone, then you're talking about $50,000 per student, and we're not talking about the catastrophic aid students, which we have a total of 26 in last year. 26 students that have catastrophic aid, which we give more for those that need additional medical help. So think about that. Are these students getting a good education for $50,000? And who is having difficulty delivering an education that doesn't include bond and interest on it, doesn't include transportation on it? That's an addition. We can't deliver a good education for $50,000 per pupil? I don't understand. I really don't. So rather than just ask for an increase, I'd like to understand what's going wrong in the funding stream. Why are we not able to do that? And finally, it is very relevant, and I'll read verbatim the 2018 Gannon decision that says the court noted that the legislature increased special education funding by $44.4 million for that year, and then scheduled $7.5 million to be added each year until 23. The court dismissed the plaintiff's argument that such 2018 funding increase only brought the funding to 83% of excess cost, and no further discussions were taken. So the Gannon question was settled. The governor, as Senator Baumgartner said we are fully funding education. we are increasing for every single student, including special education. So I would love to know specifically how $50,000 per student plus additional monies is not meeting the needs of those students. So those are some of the discussions. Senator Sykes?
Thank you. Not trying to belabor this, but we actually do have evidence, the West Ed report that we paid quite a bit of money to have done, and it talks about funds do make a difference. I would be happy to share that. There's also a legislative post-audit on special ed from December 2018. Thank you.
Senator Erickson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Funds can make a difference depending on how they're spent. It's how they're spent. And that's the question I have as we're looking at allocating additional money. I want to know how it's spent because it can make an impact if we know how it's spent effectively. Just turning over more money and saying, here you go, without knowing that, to me is irresponsible on our part, and we are not being good stewards of taxpayer money if that's what we continue to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so we need to consider a time. Would 2:30 work? 2:30. Okay, so we will be on the back in the house at 2, and we'll all plan at meeting back here at 2:30. So Holly, if you'll send out the announcement, that would be great. And if we can get back on the second floor, let's try to do that. All right, thank you. Okay, we're dismissed, adjourned.